That's true. That is very suspicious. And with as much confusion as was in there, the fact that they went ahead and arrested several people, but now from what I read, that he was released. He was one of the two suspects that were released, if I'm not mistaken.
He is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
released to the Crown Victoria.
I mean, the question I have about Hassan is why on earth he was ever promoted to major in the spring with a 6-month investigation by the FBI into his anti-American rhetoric and the completely inappropriate PowerPoints that he was giving in an environmental health class about suicide bombings and stuff like that. That raises so many red flags. Now you have to dovetail that with the evidence. I mean, since Virginia Tech, Jack, things have really changed in America. All these schools are taking part in these school shooting drills, some of which are promoted through the paper to let people know. Others are covertly done, and it scares the pants off of parents and students. And we can get into that later, but the bottom line is, in January, we had a massive number of school shootings. School lockdowns that led up to really one of the worst years in American history for school shootings that peaked out with 13 mass shootings in 1 month. And, you know, for somebody to have as much red flags as to get an FBI investigation looking into whether this guy is actually working with Al-Qaeda, sending emails, he's at the same mosque as a radical imam, all these warning signs, it really makes me wonder why he was ever promoted to major in the first place.
Well, that's going to be a hard question to answer, considering the evolving storyline that, and I've got a bunch of updated news we're going to try to get to on the program today with you, Matt. The imam who he was allegedly writing to says he didn't encourage him to do anything. Obviously, he would deny that, though he allegedly is also on the record as saying, go kill Americans. So that's kind of conflicting a little bit, and I think it might blow some holes into that story, which is going to go forward whether it's true or not, Matt. At this point, that is what they can most benefit from. So that will be the story, and nothing will impeach, including the facts or the truth, will impeach that story going forward. He, by the way, is not talking, according to most of the reports we're reading, and has lawyered up, which I would assume would be probably a good thing. What about the fact that a lot of these people that were being shot at the time thought that it was a drill? Have you read any of that?
I did hear about that, and that goes back into what I'm saying. We have been so conditioned as a nation now to accept this as the fabric of our nation, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better. It is getting progressively worse. I mean, you can look at just a history of the mass shootings in America, and you can clearly see how that it has excelled way past Columbine and is now to a red alert status where everybody's preconditioned. They think somebody's going to go postal. And not only that, but you've got elementary schools who are literally tricking the students into thinking that there's a mass shooter on campus, and SWAT kicks in the door and starts shooting kids with paintball guns. And this was in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. They had several events down there like this.
We carried that story.
Yeah, and so I can see why people might think it's a drill, because these drills are more and more, you're seeing it on TV, and it's just become daily life in America.
Looking at this, again, they thought it was a drill. Cell towers went down at Fort Hood, so communications were basically cut, similar to what we saw at Hurricane Katrina, similar to what we saw on 9/11, where the people could not be warned to get out of the building before others seemed to know it was going to fall. They were already reporting that it fell, obviously. Princess Di, where all of the closed-circuit TV cameras just happened to go out as she was heading into the tunnel, hitting the 13th column. There's 13 dead in this. In a way, there's calling cards. The strip clubs that Hassan allegedly attended in Kylene, Texas, before this event from this devout Muslim, echoing again what Muhammad Atta and the Flying Circus were up to in Florida and in the other locales before their jihad took place, this moral jihad against the evil crusaders. So much in common with these things that it's just rather glaring, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's kind of shocking when you start looking at all the connections, interconnections between a lot of these events. And when you look at Hassan and just the fact that he graduated from Virginia Tech, you know for a fact, if he grew up in Vinton, you know for a fact that he was deeply affected and so were his family, as were everybody in the New River Valley area by the Virginia Tech shootings. Then you fast forward to his day of infamy, where in some ways it's an echo of what you saw at Virginia Tech, where this supposed quiet, soft-spoken lone wolf pulls out two pistols and begins to open fire. Now, the difference is a lot of people with the myth of Virginia Tech, they always show the pictures of Cho with the two pistols, and the facts were there was only one pistol that was used that day. And, you know, it's just amazing to see that even this year at Virginia Tech, a lot of crazy things have happened, including this spring, a kid a Chinese national student who was there at one of the delis restaurant on campus, and he murdered a girl, cut her head off in front of everybody, and then held the head up in the air until the police came and arrested him. I mean, it's shocking stuff, no doubt about it. As far as Hassan, whether he was trying to do some terrorist act because he secretly sympathized with Al-Qaeda, I don't see that as much. That is the official story. That's what they're going to promote. In some ways, I look at this as if it was him and he was the lone shooter, that it is intentionally a copycat of what we saw at Virginia Tech.
Potentially, yeah, and it can be what it is. I'm not going to take away from that, but it's very difficult to get through a lot of the questions we've been asking now for the last, 8, 9, 10 days since this happened. Because again, I mean, here we are, much like 9/11. Here we are reporting it as it happens, and I understand the fog of war, confusion of reporting, but does it always have to be completely wrong? I mean, I look at every single event, and we get the initial reports, and it always turns out to be, about 100% wrong, 99% wrong. Does it always have to be that wrong? And if it's that wrong, why should we trust the media at all? The question is, through all of this, who benefits?
Well, I think that you got your answer right there with the whole expansion of the war. You've got a president who ran on a platform to end the war, and he's expanding the war. I think that is telling you right now that you've got Joe Lieberman saying that this was the first terror attack on Obama's watch. I mean, they're running with this story to fuel the war on both sides. The interesting thing that I've noticed, Jack, in just researching this whole thing is now the psychological warfare of all these operatives that are embedded in mainstream media and blog sites and everything, where they're tying together the aspects of Hassan, empathizing with some global jihad directly to Cho, and saying Americans now who are disgruntled youths, loners, they may actually snap into this homegrown terrorism plot that parallels directly what Hassan was doing with his so-called terror attack on Fort Hood. So I think that's dangerous.
We see kind of two stories leaking out as this was all happening, and we were all covering it here. Again, so close to us, pretty big story here in Austin, Texas. The story leaking out over the internet and email and telephones and Twitter, and the official story being planted in sequence at ABC, NBC, CBS, and the AP. Again, all of this perfectly controlled, because this is a great place to have one of these at a military installation, because all outgoing information can be somewhat controlled, except, again, through electronic means where people are leaking out various information, such as, again, the killer had been shot. Some people assuming, and I'm going to put that into quotations, allegedly, that he was shot by the shooters, this being Hassan, and that they thought they had got him, that he was dead. And this is why the initial reports came out that he was dead, kind of like when the BBC was reporting Building 7 had fallen before it actually did. Somebody had sent them that information, and everybody was running with it. Which I thought was just a glaring mistake in this case. This coming off of a military base where they're supposed to be intelligence pros. Could it be that the real gunman shot him and killed their patsy, which they like to do? Maybe later they could say he shot himself, which normally is the case in a situation like this, and he lived through it. Not supposed to have. With Matt Kazee on the program today. He'll stay with us for this half hour. Longer segment coming up from truthmovement.com.